Good morning. My name is Delp Higgins, and I welcome all of you here in person and those joining us virtually this second Sunday in Advent, in which the theme is hope. I was raised and taught to believe in the doctrine of the Roman Catholic Church. All my education through graduate school was in Catholic institutions. It's not surprising that my first spiritual director was a Dominican nun, Sister Joanne Brown. She introduced me to Buddhism, meditations, women's retreats, and days of reflection. When I seriously questioned my beliefs and my religion, Joanne supported my search for a new church. Nuria Love Parrish was a minister at Fountain Street Church in 2004 at that time, and I recall the service when she offered a guided meditation. With my eyes closed and tears streaming down my face, I knew I had come home. What does Fountain Street Church mean to me? The first is opportunity. Opportunity to free the mind. At the first Sunday morning book group I attended, the book being discussed was Archbishop John Shelby Spong's book, A New Christianity for a New World. This book changed my life. I had to confront the doctrine I was raised with, such as the virgin birth, Christ's ascension into heaven, and the belief in mortal sin, and the doctrine of an afterlife in a place called heaven, hell, or purgatory, and even a place called limbo for those babies who died before they were baptized. Opportunity to grow the soul through spiritual practices such as meditation and yoga, connections groups, inspiring sermons that move me to respond to the needs of our world, and opportunities to attend the Great Speaker Series, opportunity to participate in Diwali, the Hindu celebration of lights, and about other world religions. Opportunity to change the world, locally through donations to local food pantries, serving lunches at God's Kitchen, providing dinners to families being served by Family Promise, globally in sponsoring students by providing tuition assistance through the Answer program in Nepal. Opportunity to discover poetry writing through Nessa McCasey's Spiritual Expressions. Opportunity to plan and participate in the Women's Conference here at Fountain Street Church in 2010. I've been honored and privileged to serve on the governing board for the past 6 years as my second term ends this month. And the second reason I belong to Fountain Street Church is relationships. Relationships to discover and nurture with individuals of all ages. Franny Shaw was a member of Fountain Street Church for many years, up until her death a few years ago at the age of 96 in 2018. Franny often said that as she got older, many of her friends were dying, so it was up to her to make friends with the younger people, and Fountain Street Church gave her the opportunity to do that. Opportunity is one word I associate with Franny. She was a social worker, cancer survivor, widow, environmental activist, a befriender, a mother, a grandmother, a great-grandmother, an inspiring role model for me to follow. I stand here today and I welcome all of you. I share the words of Rumi, "Let your heart be silently drawn by the pull of what you really love." And I love this church and her congregation and the staff and the ministers. No matter who you are or who you love or who loves you, you are welcome here. Whether you are a believer or you are an agnostic or an atheist, you are welcome here. Whether this is your first time or you've been a member for over 50 years, you are welcome here. Discover ways to engage and be engaged in the vision of Fountain Street Church. You have a home here.
Thank you, Kathleen, for that warm and genuine welcome. I wasn't going to share this morning, but it was actually 16 years ago this weekend, Hope Sunday, that I visited Fountain Street for the first time, and Nero was preaching on that Sunday. It would have been 2005, and I sat way up there in that corner, and I too knew I was home. I don't think I would have guessed I'd be here 16 years from then. Hey, I'm Reverend Christopher. I am the acting senior minister here in this place that I call my spiritual home, where love and justice and inclusion and compassion are part of the shared work of this community's faith. And I too want to warmly welcome you to this hour of worship with one another on the second Sunday of Advent, Hope Sunday. As we prepare our spirits and our souls for this hour of shared worship with one another, I want to invite you into the space of worship by hearing the words of Emily Dickinson's "Hope is a Thing with Feathers" as our call to worship this morning. Hope is the thing with feathers that perches on the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all. And sweetest in the gale is heard, and sore must be the storm that could abash the little bird that kept so many warm. I've heard it in the chillest land and on the strangest sea, yet never in extremity it asked a crumb of me. Welcome to worship. Michelle Obama once said that you may not always have a comfortable life, and you will not always be able to solve all of the world's problems at once. But don't ever underestimate the importance that you can have, because history has shown us that courage can be contagious and hope can take on a life of its own. Hope can take on a life of its own. Many of us come into this space of worship this week all too aware of how badly hope is needed in our world. All too aware of how desperate our world is for just a little bit of courageous, contagious, life-changing hope. I won't bother to recant the litany of suffering in our world this week. I'll save it for later. But we would be remiss to not pause in this hour of our darkness and acknowledge Michelle Obama's prophecy that it takes courage to nurture hope and let hope take on a life of its own. This is the season of distraction and busyness and commitments vying for our time and appointments that fight for our attention, and it makes it seem harder and harder to make space for cultivating and nurturing and nourishing hope. Perhaps that can wait until the shopping's done. Perhaps that can wait until the decorations are up and the dinners are planned. Perhaps hope can wait for another time, another hour, another day. But that reality is antithetical to this season. That pattern is in conflict with the call of Advent, and this mindset is in direct opposition to what our world needs most from us right now. In this season of Advent, we are called to be hopeful, to nurture hope, and to let it take on a life of its own. Are we prepared to do so? As we light this candle for hope on this Advent morning, let its light call us to a slower pace. Let its warmth ground our every moment with meaning and intention. And let its energy inspire us to be courageous, and let that courage be contagious as an embodiment of hope that dares to take on a life of its own. Because goodness knows, our world needs it, and so do we. At this time, I would invite the young ones among us and the ones who wish to go to the social hall for some different activities to do so now during this special offering of music from Jonathan. You are invited to go to the social hall or stay here.
Good morning. My name is Jean Bailey, and I will be sharing the selected readings on hope for this morning's service. The first reading comes to us from Dr. P.S. Jagadish Kumar. Hear what the Spirit of Hope is saying to us this morning. Though light fades in the darkness, sun never fades. Though sun fades in the night, day never fades. Though day fades in the death, love never fades. Though love fades in the hate, memory never fades. Though memory fades in time, weight never fades. Though weight fades in the peace, pain never fades. Though pain fades in the pleas, hurt never fades. Though hurt fades in the scar, hope never fades. This morning's second reading comes to us from the poem Still I Rise by Maya Angelou. Hear what the Spirit of Hope is saying to us this morning. You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still, like dust, I rise. Does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom? 'Cause I walk like I've got oil wells pumping in my living room? Just like moons and like suns, with the certainty of tides, just like hopes springing high, still I'll rise. Do you want to see me broken, bowed head and lowered eyes, shoulders falling down like teardrops, weakened by my soulful cries? Does my haughtiness offend you? Don't you take it awful hard, 'cause I laugh like I've got gold mines digging in my own backyard. You may shoot me with your words, you may cut me with your eyes, you may kill me with your hatefulness, but still, like air, I'll rise. Does my sexiness upset you? Does it come as a surprise that I dance like I've got diamonds at the meeting of my thighs? Out of the huts of history's shame I rise. Up from a past that's rooted in pain I rise. I'm a black ocean leaping and wide, welling and swelling I bear in the tide. Leaving behind nights of terror and fear, I rise. Into a daybreak that's wondrously clear, I rise. Bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave, I am the dream and the hope of the slave. I rise, I rise, I rise.
just around the corner, right here on Division and spread throughout the blocks that surround this Cathedral of Love and this Temple of Peace. An estimated 892 individuals are unhoused or vulnerable and without access to the most basic of human needs that any one of us probably takes for granted. 892 individuals isolated from the security of everyday normalities and alienated from the same systems of institutionalized privilege that any one of us likely benefits from. And just a few blocks further, just out of the reach of the shadow of this cathedral community that we call home, 455 patients are recovering or receiving treatment for COVID-19 at the already taxed to the limits and stretched beyond capacity Butterworth Hospital, where family and friends and those who love them most wait on bated breath for what feels like a preventable future, and where others without the ailments that are beyond the confines of COVID hope and pray that the at-capacity medical facility can care for them and us as well. Further down the road, 2 hours and 12 minutes to be exact, the quiet community of Oxford continues to reel from an avoidable tragedy. Another senseless act of violence has gripped our nation, only this time it's closer than ever before. And the circle of violence and the war on our children's bodies in this country continues to draw closer to us, and we are all seeing it closing in. And we draw out from Oxford. We pan away from Michigan, and we see a nation holding its breath as our justice system considers the future of women's choice, bodily autonomy, and reproductive rights with what feels like the reverence of a coin toss. And simultaneously, we hear the drumbeat for stricter voting laws in no less than 19 states, a new era for Jim Crow that gives even the best of us pause, and yet it too seems like too much to think about or comprehend right now. And even further yet, our global neighborhood has become transfixed by yet another variant of concern as it sloppily uses colonial tools of oppression and racist segregation tactics in the name of mitigating the new viral enemy. And further yet, the world clumsily fumbles over an unending refugee crisis, and further yet, global temperatures increase and attempts to address them are met with cynicism and skepticism, and further yet, no one can actually predict or see the end of this time of suffering that we're all seeing and sharing. And so how the hell am I supposed to stand in front of you and talk about hope? I wasn't supposed to. I wanted to pass it off this week to Reverend Greta Joe. But here we are. Only a few moments ago, we lit the candle of hope. You might find it interesting to know that in the churches with deeper roots in the Christian narrative and practices, the candle for hope is also known as the candle for prophecy, or even the prophet's candle. The prophet's candle. The prophet's candle because Christians share in the hope that the prophecy or the prophecies among us will one day be fulfilled. The shared hope that one day the ancient truths once foretold by the ancient prophets might actually be enfleshed in reality, and that faith, hope, love, and joy, peace, justice, and compassion might become embodied here on earth, here and now. Prophecy and prophets. They're kind of one of those trigger words, or at least one of those awkward words, or at least one of those commonly misunderstood words. I think a lot of us jump to this conclusion that frames a prophet as a fortune teller or somebody who can predict the future. And that is understandable because a lot of contemporary communities of faith have built a false identity around prophets using this misguided understanding. But prophets are in fact some of the most powerful people in our world, both the ancient world and the contemporary one, because they are in fact the truth tellers among us. They expose the shortcomings of our society. They hold the powerfully paradoxical and infinitely necessary positions in our world in which they stand at the intersection of hope and hopelessness, judging our world against its wrongdoings and exposing us to a better way of living and being. Prophets, they hold up these mirrors to a world that doesn't always want to see its own reflection, and they hold up windows of what could be, if only our world were courageous enough to look into it and through it. Prophets are the truth tellers, and on this second Sunday of Advent, I think more importantly on this Hope Sunday of Advent here at Fountain Street Church, I too want for us to look at this as our prophet's candle, or our candle for prophecy. Because I believe we are living through a prophetic event that's bigger than these 4 weeks of Advent. If a prophet is simply a truth teller, then a prophetic event is simply a truth-telling moment or story or era. A prophetic event like the ones that we're living through right now expose the shortcomings of our society. They daylight the injustice in our midst, and they command our attention towards the longer-lasting corrections and adjustments that are necessary in our world for us to live and be part of a more loving, just, compassionate world. Prophetic events are deeply uncomfortable and remarkably unsettling because they have to be. In our daily lives, we have become complacent with injustice because most of us are not the beneficiaries of those systems of oppression and marginalization. So it takes the earth-shattering and earth-shaking presence of a prophetic event to stir us from our numbness. We have become a contemporary world, much like the ancient world, that numbly accepts these institutions of exploitation and injustice. And like our ancestors, it's only in these prophetic events that we truly see just how badly the world needs recalibrating around us and within us. A global pandemic, like the one that we're witnessing, is certainly unsettling because of the very real and tangible threat that it poses to each and every one of us. But its prophetic nature is actually in the truths that it exposes. The truths that we've probably always known but could kind of ignore until now. This pandemic has exposed just how inadequately prepared we were as a nation to take care of one another in the most vulnerable among us. This pandemic has cast an awareness on just how negligent we've been with Black lives and poor lives, elderly lives, and compromised lives. This pandemic has peeled back the layers of our niceness and revealed just how divisive our nation truly is and how entrenched we are in our beliefs. And this pandemic has made us aware of just how economically unjust our world is. Just how little we can rely on the leaders at the top, and just how unfairly the cards have been stacked for so many in our world. This global pandemic, my friends, this prophetic event that you and I are living through is doing exactly what it needs to do as it exposes our society to judgment and holds up a mirror to our world. And what we are collectively seeing is that our past resignation to an unjust and unloving world has finally caught up with us. And we're paying the price. But that is not the final word of prophecy. And that's not the final word in truth-telling. Hopelessness is not the final act of a prophetic event, because remember, the truth-tellers among us and the truth-telling events that we live through are more than mirrors. They are windows to a better future, and that is where hope returns. They're windows to a better future, and that is where hope returns. Prophetic events can and muster in a better world, and it takes hope to do that. It takes hope to not only courageously look through the window towards a better future, but also have the audacious belief that we can truly enflesh and embody that future as a society. In the ancient stories, societies were only stirred from their complacence towards collective consciousness through these prophetic moments in time, and even then they had to choose between resigning to hopelessness or courageously choosing hope in a better world and collectively working towards becoming that better world. Truth-telling moments like the one that you and I have witnessed and are living through in this very moment are an invitation to embody courageous and contagious hope and to recalibrate a world that is better than the one we inherited. When we recognize the injustice and when we know the oppression, when we are fully aware of the ways in which we exist in a world that does not lead to the flourishing of all humanity, we too join the ancient prophet at the intersection of hopelessness and hope, able to understand all that is wrong in our world and simultaneously able to understand a better world on the other side of this. It is at that intersection that I imagine the prophet Maya Angelou must have stood as she said, "Leaving behind nights of terror and fear, I rise. Into a daybreak that's wondrously clear, I rise. Bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave, I am the dream and the hope of the slave. I rise, I rise, I rise." My friends, there are an estimated 892 individuals within blocks of this cathedral of love in need of the most basic needs. And we as a people rise when we see this injustice for what it is and choose to be part of building a world that does not accept this reality. Just blocks from this temple of peace, there are 455 people fighting a preventable illness in a Tax to the Limits hospital, and countless more in our cities doing the same. And we as a people rise when we see this crisis for exactly what it is, and we choose to be part of nurturing and nourishing a community that pushes back against this trend. Only 2 hours down the road across this mitten state, our fellow Michiganders grieve the senseless loss of more of America's children to gun violence. And we as a people rise when we recognize the sin of gun violence and courageously choose hope in fighting for a society that does not accept this sin as part of the fabric of our world. Across these fractured states of America, we mourn and lament with our sisters as we anxiously watch the quiet war on women's bodies and freedom of reproductive rights, and yet we rise when we are able to see just how unjust this is, and instead choose to fight against this sexual oppression. We rise when we finally see, name, and push back against voter suppression. We rise when we fully realize and recognize just how wrong it is to punish a nation for identifying the latest COVID variant and instead publicly say, we can do better than that. We rise when we welcome the refugee neighbor. We rise when we do our part in climate change. We rise each and every time we courageously choose hope. We look deeply into the prophet's mirror, but even deeper through the prophet's window to a world that could be and should be and must be better. And we rise when we accept our place with the prophet at the intersection of hope and hopelessness and courageously choose the power that hope can and will take on a life of its own. We rise to fulfill the collective dreams of the ancestors who came before us. We rise for the collective liberation of the neighbors among us, and we rise for the collective hope of the ones who will come after us, yearning for us to leave a world better than the one we inherited. We rise, and we rise in hope, and may we rise and live in hope again. May it be so. We come to our hour of shared worship with one another, where we make space for the heart and the soul in a different way. We create for ourselves our own cocoon in this womb, if you will, and we center ourselves in the presence of one another, but also the presence of the divine Spirit. So I invite you to find your center, find your place in this room. Remind yourselves that you have nowhere to be but in this sacred gathering right now. And join me in this sacred space of prayer. Source of life and Spirit of the Advent that summons us this morning. Ancient truth and timeless wisdom that neither time nor space could contain, angel of hope residing within, among and around us. We come into this hour all too aware of how badly your ancient presence and your limitless potential is needed in our world today. We come into this hour fully aware of what it means to be human, aware of what it means to be alive, and fully aware and all too aware of the complexities of life from which no one is immune. This morning we come into this womb of contemplation and this sanctuary of transformation with deep pain and unending joy, a sense of loss and a sense of wonder and hope. And with these complexities and so many more, we recognize the unspoken realities that are upon all of our hearts this morning, within and among and around all of us in this space. And so in the stillness and the darkness and the silence of this moment, we let our collective complexities abide among us as we welcome the silence into our beings as a healing balm to our complex souls, and we welcome it into our complicated world. This morning we are particularly mindful of our friends Mary and Bill Thompson, who share that Mary's sister is in hospice. We lift up our own Tom Dooley, who is in the hospital recovering from COVID. We lift up Reverend Greta Joe and her family as they recover from COVID. We celebrate with one among us who is grateful and happy and relieved to be back here for Advent after many years away. And we celebrate with one who expresses and shares with us this morning that they are cancer-free. Blessed be. This morning, friends, as we continue our journey through Advent and as we continue to practice all that is possible and imagine this future that's rooted in these ancient truths, we pray and we resolve to surrender our pride and our egos and instead prepare the way and the space for hope. Ancient Spirit, we know that this takes courage, and so we pray for that too. Open our hearts and our beings to the kind of contagious courage that our world longs for, and embolden each of us and our church to rise and rise and rise and rise again in the faith and in the hope of love and justice and inclusion in our world. Blessed be the contagious courage and the limitless possibilities of hope. Blessed be the prophets and the prophetic moments that pull us back to the way our world could and should be. Blessed be this season that calls us back to the heart of our community, and blessed be the ones who call this community their home. Amen.
Tellest good tidings to Zion. Get thee
Thank you, choir, and Austin and Jonathan. My friends, are we not so richly blessed and it's only 2 weeks into Advent? Oh my gosh, thank you. All right, we have a few announcements before we depart today. You will see out in the narthex, I shouldn't even speak. There were 5 wreaths left this morning, which is wonderful news for the Fountain Club, but there may be a handful, but they are also selling diversity stakes for their summer trip in 2022, which is hard to say. And so please support them as you are able. Next week is going to be another richly filled and beautiful Advent service. We have Patricia Clark coming, who's a poet from Grand Valley and has some familiarity with our community. I felt richly blessed just by spending an hour or so with her on Thursday planning that service. It's going to be a beautiful service on love, third week of Advent. We will also have Robin Connell and a trio back, and we'll have the choir and organ. Oh my goodness, I pinch myself. Let's see, what else? Oh, on Tuesday, Gary Eberle's class is going to be happening. That is not correct, is it? He's like looking at me with furrowed brow. It's in 2 weeks, but really mark your calendars in a couple Tuesdays. It's that exciting. So not this Tuesday, but a week. So I was so proud of myself for putting that on my list here. A few of you have said, I've noticed since the pandemic you use your computer now in worship. Is that a thing now? And I said, it is if you turned 35 during the pandemic and you just can't read anymore. Okay, sorry about that, Gary. Okay, well, as you know, we have a tradition in Advent of the offering plate being dedicated to a cause, and I see this as one of our most noble, tangible acts of hope that we have. Last week was the Choice Fund, which provides access to safe and healthy women's choice, abortions, all kinds of advanced medical care for women, and that feels like such a hopeful and generous thing we can do here. This week is the Citizens Climate Action. And of course, I didn't type that out. It's on my piece of paper back there. But we are involved in that at Fountain Street. That is another tangible way in which we can support the environment and the organizing that's happening right here in Grand Rapids around that. It impacts what we do in our own church building and what the city does with their vision for a more climate neutral or net carbon neutral future. And so please support that. It is such a powerful way that we can embody hope by investing in this action that we are not just part of here at Fountain Street, but our city is, and many of our sister churches are, and the library, and all kinds of orgs. So please support that. I'm done with that computer for now. So, we are in this season of waiting. We're in this season where so far we have honored faith and hope. And the story goes that we were waiting for this baby at the end of it on the 25th. That's our high holy day, even here at Fountain Street. It's a story that's filled with loss and pain and suffering in the ancient world and this hope and faith of something to come. But friends, especially here at Fountain Street, we know it is not this miraculous, unexpected, mysterious baby that's going to save us. It's our collective hope that the world doesn't have to be in pain or suffering or loss. And so as you go forward this week, I invite you, and I will join you on this journey in standing at that ancient intersection with the prophet, that intersection of hope and hopelessness, which is really easy to find yourself at every time you turn on the news or hear another story of someone you love. But stand there with me. Choose hope. Choose courageous and contagious hope. Choose to believe that the world doesn't have to be as it is, because as the ancient stories tell, and we all know, there is a better future if we choose to be part of it. So go forward in courage. Go forward in hope. Go forward in peace. Have a wonderful week, my friends.